Today I'm introducing two more short stories. I'm introducing a story by John W. Campbell called Twilight, and a story called Jordan's Waterhammer by Joe Mastroianni. I'm going to start with the John W. Campbell story. John W. Campbell is a well-known science fiction author. He's been writing for a very long time. The going to be reading is called Twilight, and Twilight is very well recognized as a classic canonical piece of science fiction. And Twilight is looking at the question of what makes us human, what are we going to be like in the future. It takes on many of the same themes as one of the oldest real science-based pieces of science fiction, and that's The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. The question that's asked in both of these stories is, what are we going to be like in 1,000 years, in 1,000,000 years? Where's humanity going, and are we going in a good direction? Which you'll probably recognize as a theme of a lot of modern science fiction. The question of where are we going, and is it good for us? And often these are political pieces. I don't know if you're going to find any political motives in John W. Campbell. I don't think they're all that prominent. I don't think he's really pushing against anything that was going on in particular during his era, but maybe you might find a theme like that. So that's Twilight by John W. Campbell. The other piece you're going to be looking at is by Joe Mastroianni, and it's called Jordan's Waterhammer. And the science that's going on in this one is genetic modification. And as you read through it, you'll find that it's looking at a group of miners who are genetically engineered so that they will be better at mining. And the way you make them better at mining is you take away the things that they don't need. You take away complications, and you'll see what those complications are. It is rather a creepy story. It has very sad and very disturbing overtones to it when we compare it to issues like slavery or issues like child labor. And in fact, that's one of the things that's referenced in the story. So throughout the story, they keep referring to something that they call the book. And the book is probably not what you think. The book that they're talking about is a book of poetry by a poet named William Blake. I would strongly encourage you to look that book up because it says a lot about what's going on in Jordan's Waterhammer. So, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, these are two books of poetry written by William Blake, and what they focused on was perspectives in 19th century England on the treatment of poor people, and especially the treatment of children. And Blake was a really bizarre person. He was very religious, but he was also against established religions. And he felt that a lot of the established religions at his time were harmful to people and looked the other way when people were being mistreated. So, Songs of Innocence, it's poems told from a very seemingly uplifting perspective, talking about how heaven is a good place and everyone is being looked out for, but all of the poems in there have this dark undertone where as you're reading them you're saying, I understand what's being said, but I understand also that there's very little hope for these people. If you're looking for one particular one particular poem to look for out of Songs of Innocence and Experience, I would look at The Chimney Sweeper. And The Chimney Sweeper is a story that is, keep calling them stories, it's a poem. And that poem is looking at children who were hired because, one, they had no money, two, either their family was dead or their family had no food to eat, and three, they were small enough to fit inside of a chimney. So they were used to clean out chimneys, and they would actually slide down through the chimneys with brushes. They would be lowered down on ropes, and it was an incredibly tough job to do, and they had a high mortality rate. They got all kinds of lung diseases from being down inside of the chimneys. So this is a poem told from the perspective of one of those chimney sweepers. I think if you understand that idea, that this is a child forced into labor because of his size and because of the shape of his body, you'll understand very well how it ties in with the theme of Jordan's Waterhammer. Other things to recognize about Jordan's Waterhammer, I read an interview with Joe Mastroianni where he was discussing the story, and as you read it, it's about genetically modified human beings. And that's not how it was originally written. The original version of the story worked with androids instead of human beings. And he had one of his friends read it, and they looked it over and they said, I really like your story about robots, but wouldn't it be better if instead of sentient feeling robots, you had them as genetically modified human beings? And he made the shift and changed the story around to make that work. And I simply can't imagine what it would have been like if it was about robots. It works so well if we're talking about human beings who are genetically modified. So that's Jordan's Waterhammer, and keep these in mind when you're thinking about your analysis essay that's due in a little while. These are both very good stories to dig into, but especially Jordan the Waterhammer. I've had a lot of students look into Jordan the Waterhammer. You can do some compare and contrast if you want to. You can look at Songs of Innocence and Experience and pull things out of Blake's poetry and see how that adds to your understanding of the story. But I hope you enjoy these.